In the same way that the girl boss has dominated all forms of media in the last 10 years, the weak, emasculated male has been another staple of entertainment. We've seen it in all genres, from comic book movies to fantasy to science fiction to action films and dystopian stories. In mainstream Hollywood, entertainment companies have always found ways to subtly and yet powerfully inject a useless man into their stories in the same continuous ways. If there's a girl boss, there's usually a weak man. And as a woman, I'm sick of it. This year alone, there have been tons of examples of useless, weak, or lesser men who have some sort of strong female either protecting them or are a background character to the strong female character. I've talked about strong female characters at length in the last 2 years and how much I despise them. They are utterly useless as a storytelling trope or as a means of female empowerment because they are often turned into emotionless robots at best and utterly rudderless moral sociopaths at worst. Additionally, the strong female character only seems to have value to those who write her unless she is standing next to or in front of a man who is decidedly less than she is. The man will always be less powerful or have skills that are not nearly as important to the general storyline. They will always be there for a joke or a laugh, but no one takes them seriously. Least of all, the woman they are playing opposite of. They exist for the sake of making her look good and providing a contrast as to what modern Hollywood feels strength should actually look like. And just like how the strong female character is the most infuriating part of this new modern storytelling that we are being force-fed, the weak, pacifist male is probably the most depressing. Let's talk about why that is. Before we do that, though, we need to understand why the male characters of the past were such icons and still referenced and beloved by so many fans today. It wasn't just their fighting ability or their looks, which, don't get me wrong, I still appreciate. It was because they stood for something. Whether that something was as lofty as saving the world, or else just doing their duty no matter what the outcome would be, the aspirations and goals they had for themselves were absolute. They remained steadfast in those goals, possessing in many of them a quiet stoicism that wasn't arrogant, but at the same time was also inspiring. Those ideals they stood for propelled them through a story until the very end and made for memorable and iconic arcs that are still referenced to this day. If they fell, they got back up and continued because they were holding on to something and standing for something far bigger than themselves.
What are we holding on to, Sam? There's some good in this world, Mr. Furtle. And it's worth fighting for.
In today's male characters, none of them really stand for anything. In fact, their main goal seems to be to hide. Whether it's hiding behind the strong female character, hiding in the background of a story, or else just hiding from others in general, they are no longer anywhere close to the spotlight and seem almost afraid to be. The character of Joe, from the abomination that was Ironheart earlier this year, was steeped in two chief states of being: isolation and shame. Isolation due to his family ties and secondhand shame from who his father was. It wasn't due to anything he personally had done, though, so his shame didn't really make a lot of sense. He didn't have anything to stand for because he didn't know who he was or have any sense of self-identity or self-worth. Not only was his lack of standards infuriating, they also didn't really make sense in the general context of the story. I would much rather that he didn't exist at all, rather than inject him in a story where he didn't have much of a point. But then I suppose the whole point of the story was for Riri to look spectacular next to him in comparison, which wasn't at all accomplished. And even though he was easily just as smart as she was and had the gadgets to back it up, he wasn't really allowed to use them of his own volition because doing so would take away from what Riri was trying to do and be. He was supposed to hide while she was supposed to shine. He wasn't allowed to have any ambitions for himself because hers were already too big and needed to be addressed. If a male character has some sort of standards that they are holding themselves to or are acting in the service of others, they are often hidden in the background, and their standards and ambitions are made to seem small next to the other characters that inhabit the story. A prime example of this has been The Witcher of the last few seasons. Though Henry Cavill was the driving force behind the show's ratings and fans' willingness to keep watching, the writers did everything possible to shift him and his character into the background by writing in pathetic and depraved characters who they liked far better. The story became all about the emotions and thoughts and power struggles of Ciri and Yennefer, when the entire story was about one man and his fight against monsters, with the larger story taking place around him rather than in front of him and him in the background. But since Henry's departure due to artistic differences with the writers, the story has become about everything but him. And the quality of writing shows it. Rather than working with Yennefer, who is supposed to be the love of his life, and the two being in a partnership, the story has become about Yennefer gathering her own group of mages and others for some sort of power play, and Ciri discovering her destiny on her own. The story that was originally about a witcher hunting monsters and confronting destiny has since become anything but that. The writers know they can't get rid of Geralt completely, but they will do everything possible to undermine and minimize him in a desperate effort to highlight characters that aren't worth the time of day in public, much less for viewing. Today's male characters are either hiding as part of the storyline or have been hidden by the creators as a means of highlighting their better characters by comparison. Not only does this completely change the narrative integrity of the story, it makes for a cynical and frustrating viewing experience. In a show that's supposed to be about a really manly man going around killing monsters for money, we have a show where the man is just a man and needs help from everyone around him to kill monsters, and where he is a background character. The show shouldn't be called The Witcher any longer and should instead change its name to Yennefer and Her Acolytes. These male characters no longer stand for anything, and instead are based upon how well they can be hidden and what state of shame they find themselves in. Just how shameful they are will determine what sort of role they have in the story. And shame for these characters has been written in place of strength. These male characters are not allowed to have strength, whether that's physical strength, strength of character, strength of morals, or even mental fortitude. But it's that last bit that's the most interesting, because there seems to be a phenomena happening where men who just happen to be in positions of power because of the source material don't really seem to have a ton of mental fortitude. They are either constantly second-guessing themselves or else will crumble like a house of cards the second anyone questions them. Maybe the most prominent examples this year are Lex Luthor and Reed Richards. Both of these men, while being undeniably brilliant and in positions of power, don't really have the mental fortitude to really make themselves undeniable. The Lex of cartoons, like Justice League Unlimited and other various animated Superman movies, was a man who was older, experienced, suave, and had an ideology against Superman that was rock solid. He couldn't be convinced from his path, and he had contingencies upon contingencies to take Superman down and make him look bad. Those plans were sophisticated, well thought out, and nuanced. The Lex of the most recent Superman film uses cloning technology combined with video game controls to come at Superman, shouting phrases at his screens like A4 and C8 to deliver punches and roundhouses to Superman like he's in the world's weirdest game of whack-a-mole. And when he's finally confronted at the end by Superman, he breaks down in tears of frustration after admitting that he's simply jealous of Superman before being taken away by the police to a maximum security prison. Nothing about him screams intimidating or a legitimate threat. He's a whiny, insecure, obnoxious child who throws a tantrum when he doesn't get his way and the adults give him consequences. He was pathetic and a waste of screen time that could have been used elsewhere. And I can't believe I'm saying that about Lex Luthor, someone who was supposed to be one of the most self-restrained and in-control characters ever. But he was a complete house of cards in the film. Maybe he'll grow a spine in prison or something. The same can be said for men like Reed Richards, who was supposed to be the leader of the Fantastic Four, but spends most of the film hiding behind Sue's apron strings. He's insecure, constantly second-guessing himself, and needing reassurance from his wife. He was probably the most milquetoast character in the entire movie, seeming constantly sad and downtrodden. He wasn't convincing as Reed, and certainly not convincing as a leader. When it came to all the big character moments, like giving inspiring speeches or death-defying superhero feats to save the day, he had none of them. Instead, he hid in the background and played with his toys while his wife stood in front of audiences and the UN. He existed in a supporting role and didn't have the mental fortitude to stand on his own 2 feet, much less to be a leader that the entire world could look to when they are in a crisis. While Sue wasn't an insufferable girl boss, she was clearly the one who was supposed to be in charge, the one who was giving inspiration and hope to others, while Reed lingered sadly in the background and had an existential crisis every 5 minutes. Not only did he not have the mental fortitude to be any type of leader, he didn't seem to have the mental bandwidth to know how to have any other emotions. He's supposed to be the world's smartest man, and yet the rendition we were given couldn't even seem to believe in himself, much less others. But maybe the worst part of the whole syndrome of weak men that we've been force-fed for the last near decade is the way that they are treated by others. Not only do these men not hold themselves to any admirable standards, but no one else does either. In fact, they are not even really offered any dignity or decency as human beings. No matter their power levels or political control, they will always be perceived as weak, contemptible, and abhorrent. Despite the fact that they may have once been respected and feared by those around them, their reputations as heroes or as villains has become the first thing that has to be deconstructed in this bizarre form of nihilist storytelling. Characters like Kingpin, who were once so feared that a man killed himself by throwing his head onto a knife, are now chasing after young female assassins and having his wife cheat on him with some younger artist type and bragging about it to his face. Not only that, but he is constantly degraded by the people around him, has his trauma psychoanalyzed by a girl with memory powers, and is constantly questioned by his staff. His sense of menace is completely gone, and instead we have an aging man seemingly trying to turn over a new leaf, but being mocked and degraded constantly from every side. There is no tension with his character anymore because he has been shown to be weak and pathetic and mocked because of it. Additionally, the reputation of Superman also took a hit in his most recent film this year, which was unbelievably frustrating. At the very beginning of the movie, the audience is told that Superman has been operating as a hero for 3 years at this point, and was the first point of call in the face of a disaster. And yet what the movie constantly tries to do is tear down his reputation. He's questioned by Lois, the papers, Lex Luthor, clumsy and bizarre as it might be, the Justice Gang, and the world at large. Even after 3 years of saving people and public service, the general public turns on him in an instant. He isn't respected or creating inspiration like 30 Seconds of Man of Steel did so effortlessly. Nothing about him really created awe or hope because he is constantly beaten down through the film. There were no triumphant moments where the audience could finally look at each other and say, "That's Superman." His reputation was handled so clumsily, and he's made out to be a goofy character that constantly needs help and is easily frustrated by circumstances. His own cousin even takes a swipe at him drunkenly at the end of the film. None of the characters in the movie really respect him, so why on earth should the audience? The same problem exists with Star Wars characters like Soul, who garnered a reputation for being impulsive, overly emotional, antagonistic without cause, and illogical. His reputation as a Jedi was shot, and he was given next to no respect throughout the show, even though he was probably the only person who was deserving of it. All in all, I am really just sick of the weak men that we're expected to like as characters, if we're even supposed to think of them at all. Men have been essentially made to be afterthoughts, court jesters, and punching bags for the imagined slights that today's writers and creators have with them. And with these changes, heroism has all but disappeared, even if they are trying desperately to create infallible, omniscient females to fill those roles. And until this ends, until male characters are allowed to have plot lines, exist as more than supporting characters, develop critical thinking skills, and are given the respect that a lot of them deserve, stories will continue to suffer and degrade. Storytelling has become a combative exercise, and until the us versus them mentality is given a complete overhaul, there will be no more meaningful stories because the plot will always take a back seat to the people. Thanks so much for watching this video, guys. What do you think of this year's male characters and the movie that they have starred in? Be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comments section, and let the conversations begin. Until next time, everyone.